President Trump delayed his decision to impose steel and aluminum tariffs on America's top allies. The European Union, Canada, and Mexico will now have 30 days to finalize trade negotiations. Some countries received temporary extensions in March after President Trump imposed global tariffs on U.S. imports of steel and aluminum. The White House says it also negotiated deals with South Korea, Brazil, Australia, and Argentina. They are expected to be finalized sometime in the near future. To help break down what this all means, we want to bring in Ana Swanson. She's a New York Times reporter. She covers trade and international economics in Washington. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So, Ana, explain to our viewers why the Trump administration chose to delay this decision to impose these tariffs.
Right. Well, I think they chose to delay it because they just hadn't reached the outcome that they wanted yet, specifically with three of the trading partners, Canada, Mexico, and the European Union. With Canada and Mexico, they're striving for a new deal on NAFTA. The countries are getting pretty close, but they definitely need a few more weeks. Now they're going to be rushing to wrap up that deal before this next 30-day deadline. With the European Union, the situation is a little bit more complex. The Trump administration has been pressing them on a variety of trade measures, including reducing the trade deficit and lowering car tariffs. However, Europe says that they won't be bullied into making those concessions. And they said they saw the 30-day extension as just more uncertainty for companies and the markets. Of course, businesses like preferential policies, but the uncertainty that these continual delays is creating, we are hearing, is a big problem for them in making decisions for the future. Yeah, I mean, in your piece that you wrote for the New York Times, you say that the European Union, are insisting that these trade measures violate international trading law, and they're not going to be placated by extensions. That's what they've said so far. So it seems difficult for them to back down from that kind of a public statement and give in to some of the Trump administration demands. So, I mean, it seems like things might get tougher before they get better. At this point, both Europe and the United States are pretty intent on their positions, kind of in a standoff right now. All right, let's talk more about these extensions, Ana, because it does feel that the president is more bark than bite if he's already offering extensions to some of our trading partners. I mean, it says to a lot of people that he'll say at his rallies what his supporters want to hear, but when it comes down to tough economic policy, he's going to back down because some of the promises that he makes to the voters are not necessarily the ones that he can keep when it comes to trade negotiations. Well, there are strong arguments on both sides there. So in particular, the steel and aluminum companies that would be helped by the measure are arguing against exemptions like these. They're saying that they just allow more cheap foreign metal to flood into the American market and make it more difficult for President Trump to accomplish what he promised to the voters, like you're saying. On the other hand, there are a lot of people arguing that countries like Europe, Canada, and Mexico are really close allies and that we don't need to hit them with the same hammer that we're taking to approach unfair trade practices from China and Russia. So it's a question of, what is the goal at the end of the day here? I think it's clear that the president does like to use these tariffs and the threat of that as a tool in negotiation, but will he follow through? I don't think, many people know at this point what his true intentions are when it comes to countries like Europe, which he has criticized in the past, but is also a very close ally. Right, and if the Europeans decide to hit American goods in return, oranges, orange juice, cranberries, motorcycles, jeans, what would that mean for the American economy, specifically those industries that produce those products? Right. So the Europeans selected a list of quintessential American products that they were going to fire back at, like you mentioned. And that could cause quite a lot of pain to the American companies that depend on exporting those goods abroad. I mean, if Europe erects tariffs against those goods coming from the United States, it could also mean that, foreign competitors in other countries have an advantage when selling into the European Union, which is a huge market. Meanwhile, you also have tariffs potentially coming at the United States from China as well. So American exporters are quite concerned about the potential from these measures. All right, let's talk China. This morning, the president tweeted, quote, "Delegation heading to China to begin talks on the massive trade deficit that has been created
with our country. Very much like North Korea, this should have been fixed years ago, not now. Same with other countries in NAFTA, but it will all get done. So there's a lot of moving parts here. What is the Trump administration's first priority?
So there are a lot of top administration officials headed to China this week, and trade, it really is at the top of their agenda, although North Korea is a very important consideration as well right now, of course. But I think that what they're going to probably do is to take a pretty tough line on China when it comes to trade and wait to see what the Chinese are going to offer them. The president has threatened to hit China with roughly $150 billion of tariffs at this point, a massive amount. And so I think he's expecting China to offer certain concessions. However, what we've heard so far is that the Chinese are not actually considering two of the administration's biggest demands, which would be reducing the bilateral trade deficit by $100 billion, or taking another look at their policy of subsidizing these industries of the future and building up national champions. So it could be a tough conflict.
All right, Ana Swanson, thank you very much for stopping by. We appreciate it.